In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
Today, brothers and sisters, we see the Holy Cross in front of us. It's been there since it was brought out at the festal vigil for the elevation of the cross on Wednesday evening. It'll be there for a few days yet. It'll be here Wednesday when we reassemble for Vespers. It is a reminder to us that we are just starting into the liturgical year and all of its commemorations. We reflected last week on a healthy parish, especially when that parish is concerned with worshiping God. We thought a lot about that gospel when the Lord tells a parable about a great lord, a king who holds a banquet for his son, a wedding banquet, and invites everyone to come and participate in the glory of that communion. And how everyone that he invites initially says, "Thanks, but no thanks. I've got something better to do." And then he goes out and he finds everyone, the good and the bad, we're told, to bring them to the wedding banquet. The house of the Lord may be filled with people that would receive from him the glory that he has to share. And of course, this is a parable of God's desire to share his glory with us, human beings, made in his image and likeness, for participation in that glory. That is the key to Christianity. It is the key to understanding how the Orthodox Church has always kept alive and intact the tradition given by Jesus to his apostles and by them to subsequent generations of bishops within the life of the canonical Orthodox Church. And I talked last week in talking about worship how important it is then for every parish of that church, every parish of the Orthodox Church, to be a worshiping community, a community in which worship is primary, in which worship is central, in which worship is regular, in which worship is common, where we come together to support one another in worshiping our Lord and not remaining away as these people in the parable did, coming together to love one another, to encourage one another, to build one another up, to edify each other in that worship which saves us, which transforms us, which deifies us. That's what we do as Orthodox Christians. It's why we have such an elaborate and beautiful pattern and tradition of worship. We've only recently had this new icon put on the western wall there. And now, today, I have something to announce about the iconography that will be up in the vault. But that'll be in the announcements today, not right now in the homily. But there's something coming. We worship, brothers and sisters, as a parish. We do this. We should come together to support one another in this. We should sing. If we can sing in the choir, we especially need male singers in our choir. We should sing. We should offer our talents to God, leading the whole choir, the whole parish rather, in worship. If we can serve in the altar, we should do that. But in any case, we should come together. We should look forward to services like the Resurrectional Vigil on Saturday evening, and as many services as we can manage to bring God's presence into this world, because as his body, we bring his presence into this world around us. And if we are such a parish, then the world will come. The world will come. We'll leave behind what we heard today in the epistle reading from 2 Corinthians about the darkness and about how Christ is the light of the world and shines forth even through our sacrificial love of him. But another reading today brings attention to another detail about a healthy parish's life. And as we enter into the new liturgical year during September, it's appropriate that we think about other aspects of a healthy Orthodox parish's life. And this is centered upon love. Love of God and love of our neighbor. This is the twin commandment. This is the first and greatest and the second greatest commandment that the gospel that Jesus gives to us in today's liturgy speaks of. Matthew chapter 22 contains this statement by our Lord. We just heard it read to us. We heard it read that this lawyer comes to test Jesus. It's very interesting. In Matthew 22, Palm Sunday has already happened. There's the plan to put Jesus to death. to crucify him, to get rid of him. And then there's a series of groups among the Jews that come forward to try to throw him off balance and accuse him and get him caught up in his words and reject him. And they do this in various ways. Today's gospel speaks about how after the Sadducees tried to get him all confused, how do you get the word confused? Confused about the resurrection. The Pharisees came forward with a lawyer representing them to try to get him to get confused about the greatest commandment. And Jesus, of course, shows and reveals as God himself, the God they did not recognize, the God they did not understand or accept, that the great commandment is a commandment of love. It's not a commandment of actions. It's not a commandment to do certain things that make us worthy of God's attention, that earn us salvation. This was the great mistake of the Pharisees, and it was such a profound mistake that reverberated throughout the entire New Testament that it kind of still echoes in our time and had an effect on some Christian communities that say it's faith alone that saves us. Well, it is our faith for sure that it saves us, even though faith alone is not a biblical doctrine. But that whole statement made by Jesus today to those Pharisees who thought it was works, who thought it was that keeping the law and making everything just precise and perfect would somehow earn them salvation, Jesus says, no, it's the condition of your heart in relationship to God and neighbor. God and neighbor. It's love. Love, brothers and sisters. It's the same love that a little bit later in Matthew's Gospel, Matthew 25, the love we hear about on the Sunday of the Last Judgment as we prepare for Great Lent every year. That is part of the cycle ahead. That in Matthew 25 is the love shown by those who visit the poor, those who feed the hungry, those who give drink to the thirsty, those who comfort those who are afflicted. That outgoing love is what saves, brothers and sisters. That's the commandment, for us to love our neighbor as ourselves, even as we love God with all our being. So, brothers and sisters, as we reflect then on St. Elizabeth Orthodox Church in Poulsbo, Washington, this part of the Universal Orthodox Church, which is joined to all other Orthodox churches through communion, Saint Innocent in Silverdale, Saint Herman in Port Townsend, Holy Resurrection and St. Nicholas in Tacoma, and so on and so on and so on. I can mention churches in Uganda, churches in Tokyo, churches in Ecuador, to say nothing about all the other countries that have much a larger Orthodox presence. We are part of one church, but that church manifests herself, in the local parish community. And so, brothers and sisters, if we are to be then a healthy branch of that church, if we are to bring Christ into the world, this community in which we live, Poulsbo, Kitsap, whatever we call it, we're going to have to love God with all our hearts, minds, and souls, and we're going to have to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so, brothers and sisters, today let's think about that. Let's think about how do we love? How do we love one another, for instance, in parish life? This is very important. A parish in which people are isolated by themselves and kind of locked into their own pattern of living, refusing to really get into kind of communion with other people, is a parish that's going to have a very hard time being the Church of Christ to the world around her. We must love one another. In the epistles of Paul, for instance, we read that we are to love one another with what Paul in one place calls kindly or brotherly affection. Brotherly affection. Not an abstraction, in other words. You can't love someone with brotherly affection and look on them in an abstract way. You've got to really have a relationship with people. Now, we as a parish community, especially a growing one, will never get to a point where everyone's kind of everyone's best friend, obviously, or even friends. We won't even know some of the people that are in our parish. But we can still love them with brotherly affection. This is the word that Paul uses. It's used in Romans chapter 12. He says, love one another with brotherly affection. with brotherly affection, with love of the brotherhood, brotherly love. We have a city named Brotherly Love, as you probably know. I'm not a city, a state named Brotherly Love. Oh, no, a city, sorry. It's in a state called Pennsylvania. The city in question is Philadelphia. That's the word Paul uses, Philadelphia. Philadelphia. It means love of the brother, brotherly love. So when we love our brother or sister, people in our family, that's like the model Paul uses there, that we should see ourselves as a family. Not exactly the family that we have at home. Our homes are micro-churches, according to St. John Chrysostom. They're little churches. What we do at home with our icon corner, that gives us a place of orientation for common prayer among ourselves, with prayers before meals, for reading and edifying one another with holy reading and conversation. Our homes are an extension of the local church, just as the local parish church is a part of the universal church, the Orthodox Church. So our homes are kind of like a special part of this. But within the parish community itself, while we can't relate to everyone as if they are our brother and sister, as we would our real brother and sister, mother, father, or daughter, or son, nevertheless we can love each other with affection, with brotherly affection, kindness, gentleness, a desire, as Paul puts it there in Romans 12, to seek the elevation and the honor of the other rather than ourselves. This is a countercultural teaching for sure, as Christianity is. We live in a world in which, especially in the West, the ideology is so centered upon ourselves. But we as Christians, of course, we don't follow ideologies. No Christian should be under the influence of ideologies. Ideologies are counterfeits of Christianity. We should learn as Christians to follow the gospel, not an ideology. And the gospel teaches us to love one another in parish life with affection. Another aspect of parish life is forgiveness. That's another thing that's very important, because in parish life, not everyone's going to experience this, but from time to time, things happen that cause divisions between people. If they're not dealt with, they can grow to cause divisions within groups of people within the parish. Forgiveness is so absolutely necessary. If we, brothers and sisters at St. Elizabeth, are a parish of forgiveness, a parish of brotherly love and forgiveness, then we will be Christ's presence to everyone who comes through that door and comes here. So we must forgive. We must always forgive. If you'd like a summary of this, a scriptural summary of this, read Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3. In fact, if you want a real brief summary of it, read Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 and following. Like it's 12 through 17, I think. And Paul just goes down the list. He just goes down the list of all the different virtues of love that we are called to have for one another in parish life, because he's really speaking there about the church in Colossae and what parish life looks like. It's all full of mercy and forgiveness and long-suffering and all these things. That's how we live together, brothers and sisters, effectively as Christians. But we don't keep this just to ourselves as a parish, but we extend it beyond our parish. We love the world around us. If we are to be filled with God's divine presence, and that's what a Christian is baptized to do, if we are to be filled with God's light and not the darkness of this world, then we must love like God. And God so loved the world, as we heard last Sunday, and we hear it every liturgy because it's part of the anaphora prayers. God so loved the world that he gave to it his only begotten Son. If he so loves the world, so must we. It's pretty easy as Christians, especially traditional Christians, to feel disgust with the world, to feel disgust about the world. There's so much stuff that goes on. There's so much garbage and darkness out there. It's easy to kind of be darkened ourselves and looking on it. But that stuff, while sinful and to be rejected, is being done by people that are loved by God. God created this world, and he loved it, and he loves it, and he gave his only begotten Son to it. So we must also then participate in that deifying love that makes us go out and love absolutely everyone in the world, no matter what they're doing, no matter what values they live by, no matter what beliefs they hold. We must always be that love for the world. And that, brothers and sisters, is why we as a parish community, in addition to showing brotherly affection toward one another and being quick to forgive one another, must also be a parish community that is conducting what we usually call charity, but which is really kind of a misuse of the word in a certain sense. Charity is the old English word that corresponds to the Latin caritas, which is the equivalent of the Greek agape. We should be a parish of love that's defined in the New Testament by agape, by self-sacrificing, selfless love, an outgoing love for the other with no concern for ourselves. That's divine love. That's the love that transforms. That's the love that deifies. We must love the world around us with that agape or charity love. Now we say charity often and we think it's just like the act of giving money to the poor, right? That's kind of how the word has come to be used in our modern context. And it is indeed, giving money to the poor is an act of divine love in that sense, agape love. But charity is just more general. It's always being full of love for the other. Let me read to you. I meant to have this in my hand when I came out for the homily. Let me read to you, to conclude all of this, that one statement, which so many of us know so well, that is the perfect expression, the most certainly concise expression of what charity, love, just translated in our Orthodox Study Bible as love here, that perfect statement of love, which is the kind of statement we need to think about as we as a parish love the world around us. Now recently we've had an opportunity to be participating in the feeding of the hungry in Suquamish. We've been doing this like every other month for about a half a year. For most of this year we've been doing this. This particular time around, everything was taken care of and some people stepped forward and filled the gap, but there was a kind of a shortage, a kind of an apparent shortage of hands needed for this, as we did this past week on Wednesday evening. And we should think a lot, brothers and sisters, as a parish of are we coming to the divine services? Are we supporting a worshiping community? Are we also contributing not just money, as on our Charity Sunday collections, which, by the way, I want to say, we raised for the Alaskan clergy fund that we collected for in September, and then the bishop came here on Monday this past week to had the icon right there and everything. We raised over $4,000, as small as we are as a parish. More than $4,000, and money still, as far as I can tell, is still coming in. $4,000 to support the church in Alaska. This is wonderful, brothers and sisters. This is a true sign that we have a charitable parish community here. But we want to remember that there are many ways in which we can be charitable to the world around us, just as we are charitable within our own parish itself. And so let me now bring attention then just to how Paul puts it in that beautiful statement about love. The word he's using here is agape, right? Agape. Agape is the word that Jesus uses when he says God so agape the world that he gave to his only begotten Son. Agape love is the finest, most divine form of love used in the Greek language. Unfortunately, in English, you even see statements like love is love, like whatever. You have any kind of affection for someone else, it's love. Let's call it love, and it's just as good as any other kind of love. That is not true. That is not true. As Thomas Hopko once wonderfully, clearly put it, what kind of love are we talking about here? All you need is not love, just any kind of love whatsoever. You need divine love. That's what saves. That's what saves. Divine love saves the world. And so we want to remember that, brothers and sisters. But when we read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we remember what kind of love that is And I'm just going to read this to you and leave it with this statement by Paul, which many of us know so well. And when you hear the word love, he's using the word charity. And today's a especially good time to think about that, because if you look on the neon icon over here for this particular day that we're celebrating, in addition to the cross, and since it's Sunday, the resurrection, we're celebrating the Orthodox Church today 4 saints, faith, hope, and charity, and their mother Sophia. These 3, faith, hope, and charity, were girls. They were young girls, children, and they were put to death for their faith in the 2nd century. And their mother, Sophia, had to endure this horrible torture and death of her girls. They were all Christians, and they refused to sacrifice to the pagan deities, and they were finally put to death, and so we remember them as faithful witnesses to Christ's love and Christ's promise. But their names they were named after the 3 virtues that Paul speaks about in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And it's a wonderful way for us to remember Saint Charity, or Saint Agape in Greek, or if you like in Russian, Lubov, Saint Lubov. I was chrismated and my wife baptized in a church called Vera Nadezhda Lubov, Faith, Hope, and Charity, and their mother Sophia in St. Petersburg. That's where we're married too, as a matter of fact. And so when we hear these virtues, we remember the saints commemorated today. So let me read this. And he's speaking about speaking in tongues and even giving money to the poor. But if it's not done with love, it's not salvific. Though I speak with tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, charity, agape, I have become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror, dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I also am known. And now abide faith, hope, love, these 3. But the greatest of these is love. That, brothers and sisters, is an elaboration by St. Paul to the Corinthians of the gospel we heard today by Jesus, that love is the central concern we have for our salvation. It is the ultimate law that we are to follow, to love others as ourselves, and to love God most of all. And if we are a parish that lives that out, we will be a parish that grows and continues to glorify God and bring people from that darkness in the world into the light of Christ. The way we do this is through the cross. The way we do this is to die to ourselves so that we might be filled with the life of Jesus Christ. That's the epistle reading today, by the way. The light of Christ abides and shines forth in that which is makes its way for it and overcomes the darkness that otherwise threatens one. So let us take up our cross, brothers and sisters, on this Sunday after the cross, and let us use the cross so that we can die to ourselves and live for God and for our neighbor. Amen.
Amen.